Dragon Ball FighterZ is a game where basically everything is minus on block, even most normals. This is offset by the fact that you can chain into another move and cancel out your recovery. This means that even though your down heavy is technically punishable by most buttons on block, you can cancel it into a fast special, and therefore catch the defender trying to press a button. This video will attempt to briefly explain how you can use this system to apply solo pressure, and how you can accurately make decisions to get the other guy off of you. It's not going to immediately make you immune to pressure, of course, but it may help you understand why you're getting hit, and what you can be doing to punish or escape the other person's offensive strings. Characters can chain moves from light, to medium, to heavy, to special. Some characters can chain special back into a different heavy, but this is the exception, not the rule. Otherwise, the attacker is completely limited by this sequence. As they progress through the chain, they lose more and more of their offensive options. This means that when you block a heavy or a ki blast, your opponent is nearly ready to end their turn. Without an assist, they'll run out of buttons that they can chain into, and they'll be forced to cancel their normals into a special or a super dash to continue pressure. As long as you block this, the attacker will almost always be at slight frame disadvantage. This means that you, the defender, get to press buttons. It's your turn now. This changes a little bit when the opponent has meter available. Some EX moves or heavy specials are plus. Your opponent can also lock you in block stun and then vanish using one bar. Vanish is effectively positive on block. There are two broad categories of specials that your opponent can cancel into here. Fast specials include most beams and some faster attacks. These will frame trap you if you try to press a button. If you think your opponent will use one of these moves, your best answer is just to block. Afterwards, it'll be your turn. Sometimes your opponent will even be punishable. If you want to take a risk, though, you can always try inputting a level 3 super or another invincible move. It's a very good idea to use these options occasionally, but if your opponent can guess that you're level 3, he'll often be able to stop his string short and punish you pretty heavily. Some specials are fast enough that if you do them quickly after a block heavy, they'll cause a true block string. If this is the case, it's up to the attacker to slightly delay these specials so that they'll actually catch the defender hitting a button. Slower specials, including Super Dash and most specials that cause a mix-up, like Goku's overhead or Gohan's overhead or Piccolo's dash through, will lose to the defender mashing too heavy. If you read that your opponent is going to do one of these slow specials, you should punch him in the face with your down heavy button, and you'll usually get a full combo. This is risky, however, because if your opponent chooses to do a fast special, they'll frame trap you, which means that your too heavy or your down heavy will be beaten out, and he'll hit you first. You should pay attention to your opponent's tendencies. If your opponent only does slow specials like super dash, overheads, or cross-ups at the end of his strings, you should always press buttons, especially your down heavy, when you think his string is over. If he always does the same string, this makes it very easy, because you're always going to guess right. By contrast, if your opponent always does fast specials, like beams or some mid-hitting specials, you should simply block, wait for him to be done, and then take your turn. If your opponent mixes things up, you actually get a real guessing game. I think that overall the defender has a very slight advantage here after blocked heavies, specifically because it's very easy to convert off of the defender's too heavy, the down heavy punch. It's very easy to convert off of that, whereas it's sometimes hard to convert off of hitting somebody with a Kamehameha mid-screen. Another option that the defender has in this situation, which I haven't talked about much, is deflecting. Deflecting will beat a lot of these options. Although in an ideal world, instead of deflecting the special after the heavy, you deflect the heavy and then your opponent cancels it into the special. If you do this right, he'll just be kind of hanging awkwardly mid-screen while he's canceling into a special that whiffs, and you'll be able to whiff punish with just about whatever you want. Alright, so your opponent can do all of this stuff off of blocked heavy, but what about off of a blocked medium? Off of a blocked medium, your opponent still has all of the options we've gone over before, plus a couple of more. For one, they can be chained into heavies, which is a really good frame trap because your opponent can slightly delay this chain, and then if you get hit by the heavy, he has the easiest confirm of his life. He can also chain his medium into a forward medium or a 6 medium, which is a universal overhead. This is 0 on block, and it's actually kind of plus on hit. At perfect spacing, you can even combo off of it. But more importantly, this moves him forward, and even if you block it, he's 0, so he gets to restart his pressure if you let him get away with this. In order to stop your opponent from getting infinite free turns on you, the best thing to do is to interrupt his forward medium with either your standing light or your crouching light, depending on which character you're playing. You should go into training mode and practice doing this and figure out which of these buttons works better for each character on your team. After you press the light button, you usually want to chain it directly into a 2 heavy, which will get you a full combo follow-up. This doesn't work on all characters. Some characters have really slow 2 heavies, but you'll just play around with it in training mode. It should be pretty obvious what works. The universal overhead is slow enough that you might be able to react to it with your jab almost every time, provided that your opponent is being predictable. If you're guessing, however, the delayed cancel into heavies is going to hit the startup of your jab, and you're going to be the one being comboed. A smart opponent will sometimes use one of their other options off of medium 2. This means that they'll sometimes cancel into a super dash or a special, and they'll skip all of the heavies and the overhead stuff. This makes it much, much harder to react to all of these options. Just like after blocked heavy, a deflect here will beat many of your opponent's options. A properly timed deflect will beat both the frame trap heavy and the universal overhead. But you don't get a lot here. If you just deflect an overhead, you're pushing your opponent out, which is great, but you're just kind of at neutral. So it's a reset button and not a victory a lot of the time. Deflecting a heavy can put your opponent into a very awkward situation, especially if they're blindly canceling it into a short-range special. Again, you get to whiff punish with a button or a super and get a lot of damage. Off of a blocked light, your opponent has all of these options still, but they also have a little bit more. They can do the universal overhead, they can cancel into a special, or they can chain into a stronger button. As usual, chaining into a stronger button will catch your attempts to stuff their pressure as long as they delay the cancel appropriately. There are 3 things your opponent can do off of lights that they can't do off of mediums, however. 1, they can continue their 5 light or standing light auto combo. This string has some unique normals that can aid in mixing you up. For example, Blue Goku has a standing low as the second hit and an overhead in the third, and the overhead is very easy for him to combo off of. The third hit of Beerus' auto combo crosses up, and Trunks' auto combo will put him behind you, although it doesn't cross up during the auto combo itself. All of these auto combos that have a mix-up in the middle of the string are interruptible by you pressing a fast button in the middle of your opponent's pressure. In other words, just pretend that they're doing the universal overhead. If you think that they'll do the mix-up hit, do your jab into down heavy, and you'll usually get a combo. If you think that they'll stop the string or cancel to a medium instead, just block. More importantly, however, light attacks are only trivially negative. This means that if an opponent thinks that you're respecting his pressure, he can actually dash forward afterwards and start a new chain of light attacks. This is very difficult to react to, and you pretty much have to preemptively press a button. Since preemptively pressing a button makes you very vulnerable to a delayed cancel, it's risky. This means that a smart opponent will sometimes do a couple of lights and then do the smallest dash forward possible and restart his pressure. This will make you more likely to press buttons in the future if you don't want to just kind of block this all day, so it makes you a lot more likely to get hit by his delayed cancel frame traps. Finally, your opponent can just stop his string and grab. This will beat blocking, and it'll actually beat you pressing light. It won't beat you pressing medium, heavy, or jumping back. This is because lights push your opponent kind of far, so if you press your own light, a lot of the time your light will simply whiff while he's starting up his grab, you'll be in recovery, and he'll grab you. One of the better options here is to just hold up, because you'll just go over him, and then you can react to the grab and just super dash back down, or press a button. Deflecting after a blocked jab is more risky than in the other situations. First, deflect straight up loses to grab, which is one of your opponent's better options. Second, your opponent may very well be chaining into a down medium, which is a low on every character in the game. A properly timed deflect will reflect this, but if you're off in your deflect timing at all, because you're holding back and not down back, you just won't block. Whereas in basically every other situation, your opponent is just doing mids, so if you're off by a couple of frames, it doesn't really matter, since you're simply holding back. I haven't talked much about key blasts. You can press special during most offensive strings, and this can be a good option to catch your opponent mashing, but it's mostly used as a safe way to push yourself out. Many characters have key blast buttons that literally move them away, like Gohan, or up like Krillin. Normal horizontal projectile key blasts get more advantageous the farther away the attacker is, so they work best at the end of long strings. Some players use these as a way to safely reset pressure to neutral. Since basically the attacker is pushing himself far away, you shouldn't mind this on defense. He's doing your job for you. It's kind of like a deflect. In other words, he has to figure out how to get back in at the end of this string. One thing that you can do in order to beat key blasts is you can hit super dash when you think your opponent will use them. Super dash's projectile invincibility starts up really fast, so you'll go through a lot of key blasts immediately, and this will lead into a full combo. Don't be super predictable with this, of course, especially if your opponent can still chain into a 2 heavy, or a down heavy. Putting all of these concepts together should allow you to do some pretty nasty pressure, and should allow you to make better decisions when blocking your opponent's pressure. Here's a super abbreviated version of what you can do on defense. If your opponent is dashing up and restarting his strings after blocked lights, challenge this with your own light immediately after blocking his. If your opponent is using the universal overhead, challenge it with a high hitting light, so usually your standing light, sometimes your crouching light, followed by an immediate down heavy, and this will give you a full combo. If your opponent is canceling his heavies into a super dash or a slow mix-up special like an overhead or a cross through, challenge this with a 2 heavy, or a down heavy. If your opponent is ending his strings in a beam or another fast special, you can just block, and then afterwards you can take your turn. Some of these are punishable, others of them you can walk up and press buttons, and if your opponent is blocking your buttons, you can simply grab afterwards. On offense, remember to take advantage of all of these options. Here's a really long string that you might be able to get away with on offense using these concepts. Your opponent can correctly challenge this during a couple of places. They can challenge it after the second light, and they can challenge it while you're doing the overhead. Otherwise, though, it's going to be very difficult for them to press buttons, and if they try to press buttons, you'll catch them with a frame trap. This should lead to an easy combo, and this should lead to a lot of damage, and then a knockdown, and then you get to start pressure again. Meteor and assists change all of this pretty dramatically, but we'll save that for another day. For now, have fun being the hope of the universe, the answer to all living things that cry out for peace, the protector of the innocent, the light in the darkness, the truth, ally to good, and nightmare to your opponent's predictable offense.